Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface and the political commentator Benedict Spence. Welcome both. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's take a quick look at what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Financial Times leads with the UK economy officially emerging from a recession, with the paper suggesting it will give Rishi Sunak a reason to take heart. The Express carries an article written by the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, in which he insists the economy will soon be back to full strength. The Conservatives supporting Mail says the economy is going gangbusters. Amid ongoing speculation about a possible autumn election, the Eye reports that the government has asked the Treasury to plan for a 2p tax cut in September. The Telegraph leads with a former Labour leader saying Britain is not in love with Starmer. The Times writes about the number of children joining private schools decreasing to the lowest level in 10 years. And the Star hears that a solar flare may disrupt people's internet connections on Monday morning. Make plans for that. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you'll see on screen during the program, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And as I mentioned, we are joined tonight by Susie Boniface and Benedict Spence. Thank you so much for being with us on a Friday night. Let's take a quick look at the front page of the FT, the Financial Times. Sunak takes heart as recession lifts. So we are officially out of a recession. Susie, that's got to be great news.
Yes, let's take this in two stages, OK? So the actual definite positives are that the economy has done better than it was predicted. It's about 0.2% more than the growth has been, more than it was thought it was going to be. We are top of the G7 in terms of the amount of growth that we've had, and we are doing better officially right now than the US, Italy, France, Germany. So we're doing quite well in that regard. So that's the reason for the Conservative victory lap, if you like. However, the problem is that the economy is actually, since 2019, it's only about 1.7% bigger than it was before the pandemic, whereas all those other countries have got economies. I mean, a US economy is about 8% bigger than it was before the pandemic. Our growth over a sustained period of time has been so bad that even though it's going a little bit faster than the others now, it's just still hasn't caught up. And more importantly than anything else, as far as any impending general election is concerned, is the fact that people don't feel it in their pockets. Because even though things may be growing or changing or improving in some tiny, small, minuscule percentage way for the Office of National Statistics, the price of cheese is still going up every week. And the price of your rice, and the price of your sugar and your salt, and the price of everything you want to do. So even though inflation has slowed, it's still getting more expensive, just more slowly. And it's not being felt in people's pockets, and that's going to have a big impact.
I mean, there's something else to this, which is that even though the economy has grown very slightly, GDP per head is actually down 0.7% on where it was this time a year ago, and that's partly because part of the Conservatives, whilst they've been in office, their plan to sort of grow the economy has been to invite in as much cheap labour as they possibly can, and also by inviting lots of students and dependents to grow the economy that way. And the economy isn't growing at a fast enough rate to actually keep pace with that, which isn't actually a good thing because it means that people are earning less. So again, the idea that this is sort of a tremendous boom is not entirely true. It doesn't mean that people's living standards are improving necessarily, and all the things that Susie's just said about, you know, the cost of energy, inflation, all these sorts of things, they are all affected because fundamentally none of the structural issues that affected Britain's economy and have done for a very long time have been addressed in the 14 years in which the government have been in place. And, you know, we could latch upon any of those things, be it manufacturing, be it energy sources, you name it, they haven't really made much headway on this.
Let's take a quick look at the front page of the Daily Express. They're going on the story as well. Their headline, I guess predictable maybe, they're saying that's positive. UK will soon be back to full strength. I guess that what they're saying is you'll notice a difference, because that's the whole point for people going.
Well, eventually, at some point, we'll all notice a difference because, you know, the sun will cease to burn and then the stars will fall from the sky.
Full strength, if not very strong, isn't very strong.
But it's all about a matter of perspective. So if you are looking, and the head of the ONS says the economy's going gangbusters, which is all about how you actually, where you're standing when you look at it. If you're looking at it right now in this tiny tiny, sort of very small area where we're doing better than some of the other countries and we're top of the G7 and everything else and we're exceeding predictions, yes, that's gangbusters. If you are standing from the perspective of someone at the till in Tesco, on the other hand, it's not going gangbusters. If you stand from the perspective of someone who's trying to buy a house or is trying to sell a house or is trying to set up a business or is trying to recruit more staff, if you're someone who is not able to take a helicopter when you want to go out and get a cup of coffee, like the Prime Minister is, it's not gangbusters. And if you look at our economy over a longer period of time and take more years at it, this isn't gangbusters. This isn't how gangbusters feels. It's not how gangbusters looks. It's definitely not gangbusters. It's positive, but only because we're in black as opposed to in the red.
Let's just bring up the front page of the Daily Mail, which is where that gangbusters actually comes from. In case people haven't seen it there. No? There you go.
Going, what are you talking
That's where it came from. Daily Mail. And there's a bit... Yeah, so, I mean, they obviously have... I mean, you maybe would expect the Daily Mail to take that line, Benedict.
Yeah, I think... But the issue, of course, with this is, yes, the Mail can put it on the front, the Express can put it on the front, but nobody actually is buying it because, as Susie says, nobody's feeling it in their pocket. And even if the economy were to continue to pick up over the rest of this year, it's not going to filter through in time for this to save the Conservatives, to save Rishi Sunak. And even if it were to happen, people would still look at the legacy and say, well, OK, great, we've got a few more pounds in our pockets. But weren't those an awful few years that we had to endure? And did it really need to be that way? And so I think, as much as, elements of the press can go, oh, well, things are getting better, I just think a lot of people are very tired of this, frankly, and they want a different approach to it.
I suppose two things would make it better. One is the cut in interest rates, which, the Governor of the Bank of England said we might see quite soon. But then also, if we look at the front page of the Eye, it says Treasury is working on 2p Tory tax giveaway in September. September, obviously, the speculation is there's going to be an election at some point, but probably the autumn. Would that make a difference, Susie?
Well, the last 2p tax cut made no difference, and the 2p tax cut before that made no difference. All it happened was that there was more and more borrowing against the Never Never, where the Conservative government said we're going to cut public services to pay for all these tax cuts some point in 10 years' time, and threw it all forward, so it was going to be Labour's problem. And it made no difference at all to the polling. It didn't even, not a flicker, nothing anywhere.
If they sort of fiddle with one tax, but fiscal drag continues to pull you in another direction, people are not stupid. They do recognise that they're getting poorer and being promised the odd tax cut here or there by Jeremy Hunt, and they're not actually even getting the amount of tax cuts you were promised, just getting a small one. But again, people are fed up of this sort of drip feeding of promises.
I think the best thing they can hope for is that a slightly improving economy and the cumulative effect of some tax cuts would be enough, perhaps, that the party doesn't get utterly decimated at the general election. There'd be enough people, enough votes, if you like, to save a few of the Tory MPs so that the party can rebuild and come back sooner than if it was completely wiped out. But they have forgotten the fundamental problem that used to be in politics, that if the economy was going well, the incumbent government would return, and alternate the other way, if it was going badly, you get kicked out. It doesn't work quite that way anymore. It hasn't. Obama's election and Trump's election in the US was exactly the other way around. And it's not necessarily as cut and dried now. And I don't think, as Benedict says, even if the economy, if we all had £1 million extra in our pockets tomorrow, even if we all suddenly felt amazingly rich, everyone's still really annoyed about something to do with the government, whether it's Barnard Castle, it's Partygate, it's Boris Johnson, it's Liz Truss, whatever it might be. And it's just 14 years or something, and people are bored and want to change. And I think there's just a sense of they've been in too long. There's a kind of decay at the heart of government, and it needs to just be refreshed. Whichever party it is, you tend to get.
So look, I think being out of recession, though, is obviously good news and going in the right direction. But you're saying it doesn't matter if these people need a change. Do you agree with that?
I think the economy coming out of recession at the exact moment that Tory MPs are fleeing their own party doesn't necessarily fulfil, the idea of confidence. And on top of that, I think people have also seen with COVID and Ukraine and also what's happening in the Gulf, the British economy is incredibly weak and susceptible to global headwinds. It's actually out of the hands of their own politicians. So if you have your own politicians sitting there basically going, well, we could maybe fiddle around the edges a little bit, and some of their own sort of backbench MPs going, right, well, I'm not going to stand again, or I'm going to join the Labour Party. Even if things, as Susie says, even if things were to pick up, nobody has faith that these people actually even have faith in themselves that they can turn this round, I think.
It adds to an aura of decay.
Yeah.
That's the trouble with it.
That's not going to be...
It's not quite gangbusters, is it?
No, not really.
Sorry, we've unpicked that one, haven't we?
Susie, Benedict, stay with us. Coming up, the former Labour leader, Lord Kinnock, says voters aren't in love with Sir Keir Starmer. Does he have a point? We'll talk about that next. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Susie Boniface and Benedict Spence. OK, let's go straight to the front page of the Daily Telegraph and their lead article, Kinnock, voters not in love with Starmer. These are the words of Lord Neil Kinnock, saying that Labour could be heading for a 1992 moment. What do you make of it, Susie?
They're slightly making a lot out of this. So basically what's happened is Lord Kinnock has been speaking to a Radio 4 programme. So this isn't questions that the Telegraph have asked him about. They haven't interviewed him. And he said expressly, look, I'm not going to say it's like 92 or 97 because every election is different. I don't know. I think we are going to win. And he doesn't know how big the majority is, was pushed on that. But he did just say the one thing they've really hooked on here is that he said, look, I think it's fair that people are just fed up with the current Conservative government and they want to change. They're voting out of despair rather than because they're in love with the alternative. But I can remember 97 and not everyone was madly in love with Tony Blair. And the people,
except Tony Blair.
Except Tony Blair. And maybe Peter Manson. But a lot of people were voting because in 97 because they just were bored of a long period of one particular party in government which had a sense of decay about it, the whole back to basics thing and all the scandals that was around John Major's neck. And they just wanted a change. That's the biggest sense I get of where we are now and the similarity.
You do hear that so much, though, that people are just, well, we were talking about it before, that people are exhausted of the Tories rather than love Labour. Do you think that's fair?
I do. To be fair, I don't think Sir Keir Starmer expected this to be the election that he was going to win. I think that he thought he probably had a lot longer to sort of drag the Labour Party from where it was to a position of being electable. He wasn't expecting, perhaps he should have done, given who was Prime Minister and then Prime Minister, perhaps he should have expected the Tories to set fire to themselves, but he didn't expect that. That wasn't on the cards. So they are, I think, a good sort of 5 years ahead of where they expected to be. But, you know, if the ball comes loose from the back of the scrum, you do have to be ready to pick it up, as Boris Johnson said. This is much more, I think, about them trying to be a little, you know, not trying to sound too triumphal, not trying to sort of, you know, give the impression that they're already in government. Lots of people, a lot of commentators, people like us are saying it's a fait accompli, but it's in their interest not to, because as much as anything else, we saw this at the local elections, the mayoral elections. Actually, they didn't get the numbers out of people to vote as they might have expected. Granted, it's local elections, fine, but there were people sort of voting for the Greens here or there, the Lib Dems here or there, or of course for independent candidates. We've had this sort of slightly awkward moment about Gaza where you have independent candidates, George Galloway, for instance, sort of coming forward and actually being able to take votes away. So I think they're just trying not to get too far ahead of themselves, wait until their feet are under the table, until they actually sort of sound the trumpets of celebration, because things can change, as Boris Johnson found out to his own demise in a snap of a finger.
And I guess it's because of that a lot of Labour staffers are not allowed to take any leave. Let's take a look at the FT weekend and the story there. Exhausted Labour staffers chafe at holiday limits in run-up to election. They're not going to love Keir Starmer either.
Well, no, but half the point of being a staffer for a political party is you're trying to get it into power. And if that moment is somehow around the corner, it could be tomorrow, it could be in the next couple of months, then it is the unwise time to go and say, I'm going to take 3 weeks off and go backpacking around Vietnam. It's not really the time to be doing it.
I disagree. This is the time for the workers of the Labour Party to unite and rise up against the awful, oppressive Sir Keir Starmer. And we all know it's going to be at the end of the year anyway. Actually, Rishi Sunak is desperately clinging on to being Prime Minister. He doesn't want to give it up too soon. They're pushing it as far as they can to the end because they hope for some sort of Hail Mary event. You know, they're not going to bring it forward any soon, otherwise they'd stop being MPs.
Let's take a look at the story that everyone will be talking about on Saturday. Well, I say everyone, people that watch the Eurovision final anyway, and that is the Eurovision Song Contest and the whole debate that there's been about the Israeli entry. And I guess it centres on the issue. Eurovision always say that they're not political, but then they are sometimes. What have you made of the whole debate, Susan?
Far too much. I've turned off Twitter. No, I think, I mean, if you want to say that a country that has behaved in a way that we do not approve of should not be allowed into Eurovision, as we did with Russia, for example, then maybe use an argument for saying that Israel should not have been part of it this year. But that would have required the consensus amongst the organisers and for them to have done something. They haven't done that. We are in a situation where Israel is in the contest. And I think booing this young woman because she happens to be singing a fairly boring, bland song about living in tempestuous times, which seems to be fairly on the money for me, is a very unreasonable way to react. And I think, really, Eurovision is about celebrating all the things about us that are very, very different and being as mad and crazy as possible also. But I look forward to the day when we have an Israel and Palestine duo singing together and being Campus Christmas on the stage. I think that will be quite marvellous, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people in the city of Malmö have really brought shame on themselves and their city by the fact that this person needed such a large escort to reach to the venue and needs to be sort of kept under 24-hour armed protection in her hotel. As Susie says, this is just a girl who wants to sing. She is not a member of the Israel Defense Forces. She has never been part of the Israeli state apparatus.
Yeah.
I think she was 1 year old when Israeli troops were last in Gaza. This is so far removed from being her responsibility. Let's be clear, it's because she is Jewish. Actually, she could be as vociferously anti the Netanyahu regime and people would still be behaving this way.
Let me put you the counter argument. I mean, obviously, no one is blaming that girl. That goes without saying. But a lot of people will say when you want to oppose a country and their policies, then actually boycotts work. And the example that's usually spoken about is South Africa, and that this would be a kind of cultural boycott
Then
on
boycott
Israel.
it. Then boycott it. That means you withdraw. That means you do not take part. It does not mean that you turn up and issue death threats or make someone feel threatened or unsafe in their space. That's not acceptable behaviour. And although I will just say for the pigeons of Twitter, although Eden Golan has said that she intends to join the Israeli Defence Force join up when she leaves Eurovision, she has no choice in that matter. It is mandatory national service. And I'm really tired of hearing people go, she wants to go and commit genocide and kill babies.
Obviously, it's not about her.
necessarily
It's
the
about
case.
her representing
That's
Israel.
just,
But again, I have to say, it's very fortunate that Azerbaijan didn't qualify for the final this time because they have committed ethnic cleansing against Armenians in the last year, and I can guarantee you absolutely nobody would have protested against them taking part if they had qualified. But we've managed to sidestep that rather awkward conversation because, of course, if you're an oil state, you can get away with that sort of thing.
I guess the conflict between Israel and Hamas has proved divisive in our country.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? It's always the one about the Jewish state that really gets people's goats up. Never, you know, Rakhine, never the Uyghurs, never Sudan. There's a second genocide in my lifetime happening in Darfur right now, but people don't really care about these things,
and no one
do
ever
they?
talks about those Arabian countries which are cooperative with Israel and which are supportive of it, and which is against what Hamas has done.
It's just the poor
it's
Jewish
Iran
singer
and Palestine
who gets
have managed to be sort of the nexus, and that's not really indicative.
We're going to have to leave it there for now.